stood outside the operating room during the surgery. She's reported doing fine and is back at the White House at this hour. Press Secretary Jim Brady, however, who was struck in the head by a single bullet, is reported now out of surgery in critical condition, and doctors cannot predict the course of his recovery. They do say that his vital signs, his reflexes indicate that the brainstem is functioning, and so Brady's doctors are somewhat more optimistic than they were just 2 hours ago. The next official medical briefing is at 8:30 tomorrow morning. But for now, we can say that the wounded President Reagan, who just about 9 hours ago walked into that emergency room across the street, is recovering nicely, that he is reported in good and stable condition. Jim McManus, CBS News at George Washington University Hospital in Washington.
Good news indeed, Jim McManus, and we'll be coming back to you a little later on in the broadcast. It was mid-afternoon. President Reagan had emerged from the Washington Hilton Hotel after delivering a speech. He was waving to well-wishers, about to enter his bullet-resistant limousine. Lem Tucker was there when the shots rang out.
With the usual aides and Secret Service agents preceding him, Ronald Reagan was leaving the Hilton Hotel. He just addressed a labor meeting, got a very good reception, and that may have added a bit of luster to his usual public smile. Near him, the three men who would in seconds be wounded. At Mr. Reagan's side, Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy, 31 years old, from Chicago, married, 2 children. A few feet away, just a yard or two in front of where I was standing, District of Columbia police officer Thomas Delahanty, 45 years old, a 17-year veteran of the force. And a few feet away, almost hidden from view, Press Secretary James Brady. Those were their places when this scene began.
Mr. President!
No one on the scene seemed to know that the president had been shot. Later, White House officials said even he did not realize it at first. The suspect, John Hinckley, had apparently been standing in the press area just to the right and behind where I was standing with other news people. There were many non-news people in the immediate area. Hinckley was instantly subdued, sped away as soon as a police car was brought up. Left there, the victims of this senseless afternoon drama. Press Secretary Brady, 40 years old, shot through the head. He came late to the Reagan inner circle, but gained the confidence of the president. His high good humor may have served him well in that regard, as it did with his adversaries in the press corps. Tonight, Brady is in critical condition after a 6-hour operation. Officer Delahanty, who fell almost on top of Brady, was wounded in the neck and shoulder. He is listed in serious condition. And Agent McCarthy, wounded in the chest and liver, was operated on. His condition tonight is described as stable. Lem Tucker, CBS News, Washington.
In custody tonight, charged with firing the shots at the president and those around him, is a young man named John Hinckley, Jr. He was driven tonight from an FBI field office to the District of Columbia courthouse in a heavily guarded motorcade for the formal arraignment on the charges. Fred Graham reports now on who John Hinckley Jr. is.
There is mounting evidence tonight that John Hinckley had stalked America's leaders before. Hinckley was arrested at the Nashville, Tennessee airport last October 9th when then-President Jimmy Carter was there for a speech. Airport police picked Hinckley up on the way out of Nashville when 3 handguns and 50 rounds of ammunition were discovered in his suitcase. Hinckley is said to have been in Nashville since October 7th and to have remarked that Ronald Reagan had canceled a scheduled appearance in Nashville for the 7th. Hinckley's ticket was to New York, where both Mr. Carter and Mr. Reagan were scheduled to appear at the Al Smith dinner on October 13th. He paid a fine in Nashville, and since he was never convicted of a crime, apparently his name was not entered in the FBI's computers or the Secret Service's list of persons considered dangerous to the president. Hinckley is next recorded as being in Dallas, where pawn shop records show that he bought 2 .22 caliber revolvers on October 13th. The FBI says he was arrested in Memphis within the past 6 months for what was described as a property crime. He was again fined and released. Hinckley's choice of a hotel in Washington suggested that he came here with President Reagan in mind. A J. Hinckley was registered here, one of the closest hotels to the White House, a little more than a block away. If convicted for attempting to assassinate the president, Hinckley could get up to life imprisonment, and prosecutors say there are numerous other charges that could be added when an indictment is eventually issued. The Secret Service says there has been no evidence that anyone else was involved. Fred Graham, CBS News, Washington.
His high school yearbook picture, a pleasant face, nothing there that said hostility or violence. John Warnick Hinckley, Jr., in his senior year, 1973, at Highland Park, Texas High School, member of the Student Government Club, Spanish and Rodeo Clubs. He would be generally thought of as an advantaged person, a resident of Highland Park, where many of the wealthy of the Dallas area live in fine homes. A junior high school acquaintance recalled he was a real nice guy, but moody sometimes. A senior high school classmate remembered John Hinckley, too.
Just that he was a very quiet student. He wasn't, one of the noisemakers, I guess you'd call him. And from what I remember, his grades were always very good.
In 1973, John Hinckley enrolled at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Business Administration. He did not graduate. He was last enrolled here in the summer of 1980, Arts and Sciences. Rocky's Pawn Shop, 2018 Elm, the same street in Dallas on which President John Kennedy was assassinated. In this pawn shop, owner Rocky Goldstein says his records show on October 13th, 1980, John Hinckley bought 2 guns like this one.
The ATF and the FBI has been down there checking my records. And I've been getting some nut calls calling up. They're going to blow the place up. They're going to bomb the place. Maybe they're going to do me bodily harm. I don't know.
It was in 1980 that Hinckley moved to Denver. David Dick, CBS News, Dallas.
John Hinckley Jr. stayed off and on, say neighbors, at his parents' home in an affluent section of Evergreen, a town near Denver. His father, an oil and gas company executive, arrived home shortly after he heard the news today to be met by Secret Service and FBI agents who questioned the senior Hinckley and his wife at a neighbor's home. Later, family attorney Jim Robinson read a statement saying that the younger Hinckley had recently received psychiatric care, but the evaluation, said Robinson, did not indicate the seriousness of his problems. Other recent activities of the jobless college dropout are sketchy. It is known that on March 11th, he sold a guitar and typewriter at a Denver pawn shop for $50. He never reclaimed the items, but he left a strong impression on the shop clerk.
He was kind of shaky about it, and he was really a strange-looking fellow, I would say.
How much total did he get for it?
$50.
Did he stick around long? Did he just sell it and get rid of it, or?
Yeah, he sold it, got rid of it. It was like he was desperate.
And a few days ago, Hinckley checked out of a motel in the Denver suburb of Lakewood, a motel where it's believed he had stayed for 2 weeks. Hinckley's motel stay and his pawn shop visit are under investigation by the FBI. His parents, described as distraught, said in a statement they will stand by their son. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Denver.
As we have throughout the afternoon and evening, we emphasize again that there is a presumption of innocence on the part of young Mr. Hinckley. He has been charged with the crime, but until and unless he is convicted of a crime, that presumption of innocence continues to prevail. Also, it may or may not be worth pointing out, in answer to the question, did the police or the Secret Service fire their weapons at any time during the afternoon? And another question, do we know that all 6 shots came from the same weapon? The Secret Service tonight told CBS News at this point.